everybody. We'll be starting the session on local energy action. I'm Joshua Singer, and I'm running the Local Energy Solutions Work Group, and I'm the Program Coordinator at Clean Energy New Hampshire. We are hosting this, and we're hosting this this conference here. I know that a lot of you are committee members and municipal members of Clean Energy New Hampshire. If you're not, please contact me after and we can talk. Clean Energy New Hampshire runs the Local Energy Solutions Work Group, and we're also working with Monadnock Sustainability Hub, Vital Communities, and we have a speech by Revision Energy and Dan Weeks, who's right over here. So that'll be towards the end of our presentation. If you have any questions, we'll be answering those at the end of this session. And I'm going to be walking you through the Local Energy Solutions website and talking about what we can offer you. So this is our homepage here. We have a whole setup for the conference. If you logged in online, you probably found your way onto this website. There's also a lot of resources on this website for you if you're a municipal member, or if you want to just do local energy projects in the state, including through our North Country Program Coordinator, Melissa, who's also here, and will be giving some speech. If you've ever been interested in doing clean energy projects through your town, doing either through individuals or through municipal buildings or things like that, those are all things that we can help you with. And depending on what area you're in, you can either talk to myself or Sarah here, who's doing the slides, or Annie in the Monadnock region, or North Country. So we can direct you in the right where to go. If you could move to our About page, you can learn about the Local Energy Solutions Work Group. We've been around for about 10 years as the Local Energy Solutions Work Group, and longer as a working group of people that are in the state working to help people forward clean energy, to do clean energy tech, and to move forward policy in the state. Originally created to move forward clean energy policy through people that were either in governments or nonprofits and municipalities around the state, just wanting to move the clean energy and or local energy policy forward that was very inexistent in about, I think it was 2008 when we started. These are a bunch of people that you can reach out to. All of their information and websites are linked on the page. If you'd like to get in touch directly with any of these people, there will be emails soon, or you can reach out to me, myself, or one of the people here, and we can refer you to them. These people are all very willing to talk to you about clean energy and willing to help you yourself or your municipality with working through clean energy projects. Move to resources and local energy action. So we created this page specifically for this session, and we can work our way down it. The first step is how to start an energy committee. If you're in a town that does not have one, we can help you with that. You have a right as someone in your town to start an energy committee as long as you have 3 members that want to do it. So to bring it up with your town, figure out what the setup of your town is, if you want to bring it to committee or bring it to your alderman, but we can help you with that. That is a really good process to make sure that they actually have to hear what you want to get done. If you're friends with your alderman or someone on your town council that can help you with that, that's also a method for going about this. If you don't want to go through the bureaucratic way, you just want someone that can put this legislation forward or the proposals forward. The local energy committee, or the energy committee legislation is SB 189, which is linked on here if you want to read through it. It's not very long and tells you about what the qualifications are for starting an energy committee. We have a couple different strategies on here for what to do with your energy committee, how to garner members, and how to get your town interested. There's a case studies page, which is a little bit unorganized, but goes through many years of case studies of towns creating local energy solution projects. So solar panels, weatherization programs, energy audits, things like that. Finding power from different providers, figuring out financial solutions for energy projects.
I'm going to show them what it looks like.
Sure.
Because they can.
If you have, that's it. If you have a case study from your town that you have not shared with us, we would love to put it on our website and have contact information. One of the things that we're working on currently is getting a resource base of people who have done certain projects so that people can contact you and ask how you did it. It's a little bit different in every town, depending on how the town works. We can list all of that information on here for you, and then people that want to do these kinds of projects can then reach out to you, either through us and then to you, or just listing your email as normal. So these projects range from, I believe, 2011 to 2019 was when we have stopped uploading. We're looking for more right now, and then they'll continue down into biomass energy and different project categories, so that we can have, if you want to do a biomass system, look at biomass and see people who have done that. We're working on this project, but we need your help to figure out how things have been done, how you've gone about doing it, and then create a resource for everybody. Scroll down a little bit more. Then we have a list of our partners, people who can help you. From Eversource, Developed Communities, to GDS, NH Rural Renewables, Granite State Clean Cities Coalition, which was outside doing the Ride and Drive event. There are lots of people around the state who are working in organizations that want to help you do clean energy projects. We can connect you with those people. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me or someone at Clean Energy New Hampshire, and we can help you, or any of the people that are giving presentations today. We'll be happy to help you.
You know, I think we have a minute. Would you mind doing a quick run through of the acronyms and just orient people?
Sure. Eversource is a state utility. Little Communities is where Sarah works, and they work in the Upper Valley. So that's New Hampshire near Hanover, and Vermont near White River Junction. NEEP is Northeast, what is it?
Northeast Energy Efficiency Program or Partners or something.
Great. I know what they do, I don't know what their acronym is.
Well, what they do is most important, so.
TNC is the Nature Conservancy, EPA is the EPA.
Well, hold on, what does NEEP do? Briefly.
I'm blanking right now.
They provide a lot of support for, they have an energy efficient, high performance schools program. And they work all across, they have 8 states they cover. They do a lot of work. I work with them in home energy labeling as well.
Yes.
But they're a resource that goes beyond New Hampshire.
You just jogged my mind that we did a webinar with them yesterday.
Poor Josh is being pulled in a lot of directions right now.
The EPA, there's a New Hampshire branch, and we can connect you with the people that are working at the New Hampshire branch of the EPA.
They do Portfolio Manager, which is, some of you hopefully know, but that's where a free software program to input your energy use as your municipality and track that.
Yes. LRCC is
Lakes
Region Community College.
Lakes Region Community College. They do workforce trainings, and I think they're involved in Button Up as well, the
Yeah.
Button Up campaign program.
Yeah, I think we had someone from there, I'm not sure.
Andy.
He's here, but he's walking around somewhere. Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire is Henry, and a couple other people that are in the area. You might have listened into their session early in the morning. That was the first session in the ballroom.
Hold on, I was going to show you Henry.
There's Henry.
There's Henry. Whoops, there we go. You say very dapper? I thought someone just said he was very. Anyway, keep going.
Okay. GS Associates works with energy, for sure. Engineering. Yeah, energy engineering.
Yeah.
NH Rural Renewables is exactly what it sounds like. They do renewable energy projects for rural New Hampshire. The CDFA works with local communities around New Hampshire for funding, I guess, projects they deem worthwhile to fund, and they're great for community action projects.
Yeah, I would say, so this is Scott, he's here from CDFA. He's a really great person to call if you don't know how to fund a project and you want someone to point you in the right direction.
Yes. New Hampshire DES is Department of Environmental Services, so they provide the services like any other department of environmental services in a state. You can go to them for anything that you're interested in. They provide certain amounts of funding, grants, loans, things like that, but they're also a great informational resource for any laws that would apply to you. UNH is University of New Hampshire. Unitil is one of our utilities. Monadnock Sustainability Hub is Annie, where Annie works, and she can give a more thorough explanation of what you do. They do very similar work to Clean Energy New Hampshire, specifically in the Monadnock region.
Yeah, you pretty much summed it up. We were able to connect a lot of different community projects and energy committees and do work with both solar campaigns and electric vehicles, anything under the moon. And basically we can help connect you to people in the region if you're within the region, or even direct you to Josh for the other regions up in New Hampshire. Yeah.
Thank you. The New Hampshire PUC, or the Department of Energy, is the branch of government which regulates all of these projects. So if you're interested in doing any of these projects, you have to work through their regulations. We would be happy to be a resource to help you decipher the PUC and the new Department of Energy. Liberty is a utility branch. New Hampshire Electric Co-op is an electric co-op in New Hampshire, which provides a lot of incentives for clean energy projects. So if you are in New Hampshire Electric Co-op territory, you should reach out to them and see what kinds of incentives you can get for clean energy projects. Granite State Clean Cities Coalition is one that Jessica runs. If you were doing the ride and drive outside, that was Jessica.
All right, so next is toolkits, which I think I offered to talk about.
Yes.
Happy to give you a break if you will take over the.
Sure thing.
So, quick question. Didn't ask this at the beginning, but how many of you are on an energy committee? Okay, so quite a few of you. A lot of these resources, I work with a lot of energy committees. I'm Sarah Brock at Vital Communities in the Upper Valley, and a lot of our energy committees forget that you have a whole lot of work that's already been done that you don't have to reinvent the wheel on. That includes knowing who to contact when you've got a question, but it also, it also includes a growing bank of toolkits where we've had energy committees or organizations like myself developing resources for volunteers in a town getting things done, so you don't have to create it, you can just steal. So, wow, you just brought up a lot of things. Can you just jump back up to the main page of that one? Thank you. Let me just tell you what these are, and then Josh can give you a preview of what they look like so you can go back to them later. There is a strategic energy action toolkit which lives on the NH Energy site. We developed it back in 2015. That whole group of partners that Josh just talked you through developed this toolkit. The parts of it that I think are most helpful include a template for a scorecard. I've done this exercise with a lot of energy committees, whether it's a new committee that's just trying to figure out where to start with, or often a committee that's pretty well established but maybe is lacking on volunteers, or has got a lot of project ideas and doesn't know where to go, or is feeling like we're in a lull. The idea of using a scorecard, are you trying to download it?
I was trying to open it.
Oh, it's not a big deal. Is that you brainstorm, you generate a whole bunch of project ideas, and you come up with 6-8 criteria. Things like, this is going to have an impact on greenhouse gas emissions. This has got high educational value. This is very visible. We've got someone who's interested in this, and you run each of those projects through that objective list of criteria, and it makes it a whole lot easier to have that conversation and narrow down to the thing that you can all commit to and move forward. So, sounds simple, but there's a template for it. Please use it. That's one of the secret tools I always pull out for energy committees. It works really well. But the toolkit has a whole bunch of tools. There's some templates for helping your committee think through goals and vision, for doing an asset mapping to really think through what you've already got in your town that you should be tapping, for thinking through what kinds of opportunities and challenges are unique to your community that might help drive what kind of projects you take on, and the strategies,
It's okay.
that's okay, jumping around on me, as well as a whole bunch of sample projects from other communities, so you can kind of go through a checklist and be like, done, 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 oh, that sounds interesting. And then the project scorecard, template action plan, so just project management basics, but as you know, on a volunteer committee, some of that stuff, it's helpful to have a template for it. So jump back up to the toolkit page. The other thing I would mention, and it was on the website previously, it might still be, if you are interested in using that toolkit and you would like some help, whether it's Josh or myself or Annie, there's some of us on the LES work group who are able to go and do free consultations with your energy committee and figure out what tool from the toolkit would be most helpful, and he can help you facilitate that. So don't be shy if you're interested. So back to the toolkits list, Josh. Thank you. So the second on this list is a renewable energy tool belt. It was developed by the Nashua Regional Planning Commission like 2017 or so. And it was specifically designed for municipalities who are trying to look at renewable energy options. And it kind of walks you through start to finish all the things you need to be considering and where to go for resources. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but it was developed by a number of the work group partners, and it's free and available to anyone. So know it's there if you are trying to do renewable energy and not sure what process to follow. Back to the top. There's a really, there's a really great communications toolkit that just came out literally yesterday. I told them to put it online because I knew I would be speaking to you. We have a sister network of energy committees in Vermont, and there's a group of us, myself included, because I work in both Vermont and New Hampshire, that spent the last 6 months working with a little group of energy committees, and they were Vermont committees, to pull together a resource for how to do good community-based outreach about energy if you're an energy committee. Some of this stuff is obvious, but we were able to take some of the best practices from a core group of energy committees and boil it into this great toolkit. If you click on it, maybe you haven't linked it yet, that's okay.
Is it on the Vital Community site?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We will make sure that it gets linked after the conference. It's got a couple things that I think are really helpful. One is a communications inventory. When I work with energy committees, I coach them to do an exercise where you brain dump every contact and resource and mechanism that you have in your community to get the word out. And there's prompts, where are the bulletin boards in town? Who are the influential people? Like the person who owns the hardware store in my town. If he is on board, everyone else will be. You know this stuff. Like you build the inventory, and then you go back to the inventory every time you have a specific outreach project, and you kind of cherry pick what are the pieces from my overall outreach menu that I'm going to use for this. So you're not reinventing your outreach plan every time you do it, because that gets exhausting when you're running a couple of events a year. So there's a template for that. There's also a template for building a specific to an event or specific to a campaign outreach plan with some prompts for thinking through your goals, who your target audiences are, what your messages are, and which of those outreach strategies you're going to specifically tailor for that campaign, and then how to delegate that across your team. Again, this is not rocket science, but having to reinvent those processes every time is what gets exhausting when you're a volunteer committee. So know that this resource exists, you can steal from the template, and maybe that makes your work a little easier. And then finally, we have, as some of you know, in the Upper Valley where I work, we've had some really successful campaigns, mainly solarized and weatherized campaigns, where we've partnered with local contractors and installers and have driven a lot of residents to either put solar on their homes or weatherize their homes. And we've done that by energy committees doing local outreach and forming these partnerships. We've also boiled all that learning up into templates that anyone can copy. So we've done some work in the Monadnock region, shipping off all of our templates and learning so that you were able to do your own solarized program. And Melissa in the North Country has also stolen some of our weatherized work so that we can get some of those communities building off what we've done in the Upper Valley. So if you're interested in those kinds of campaigns, know that there's a whole lot of already done work that can help you launch your own. And I think that's it for toolkits.
I think that's all I have.
No worries. Oh, you know what? There is one more. I need to add, I'll have you add this. There is, for any of you interested in transportation at the local level, there's a whole lot of information out there about electric vehicles and how to bring charging to your communities. What there's not a lot of information out there about is the flip side of that, transportation efficiency, working with transit and carpooling and bike ped. There is a toolkit. My colleague Bethany Fleischman created it for towns to work with transportation efficiency and build that into your energy work. It's really great. I'll have Josh link to it, but that's the other resource that is available and you may not have known about.
Okay. So I think we're going to move on to Annie. I'd like to.
I think we're going to have Dan speak with us.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Then we're doing the
Surprise.
yes.
We on the
All right.
spot.
Quick question before Dan gets started.
Yeah, of course.
Do you know how many towns have energy committees roughly, percentage-wise? Is it 50, is it 10, is it 75%?
Percent?
Yeah, just 1%.
Percentage-wise, I think it's around 40%. Okay. There's a lot of small communities in New Hampshire. There's a lot of small towns in New Hampshire that don't have enough people to necessarily develop an energy committee easily. So something that we've worked with is doing county committees. So we have a couple counties as members that we've worked with to collaborate so that they can make a countywide, and that's a little bit more difficult because you have to get all the towns to agree to it, but it's possible with smaller, and Melissa would be a good person to talk to about that because of we work with small towns every day to get things done there, and about the challenges that are involved in people, either towns not having a lot of full-time people that are working at them, or the people that are in the towns not knowing who to contact. So it becomes more difficult as the towns get smaller, as there are less like full-time employees. But I'm developing now a list of municipal energy committees, and we've done a survey. We did one about 2 months ago that polled a lot of the local energy committees around the state. We didn't get a ton of response back because one of the biggest problems with energy committees is keeping information up to date and knowing who is the right contact for that. It's very easy for these committees to die when you've only got 3 people and then 2 of them decide that they don't want to do it, or they move, or things like that, and then it just ends. So we're trying to work on a nice resource database so that people can know who's the contact. We can go in and get that information, and you can know who has an energy committee around you, who's part of Clean Energy New Hampshire, who has done certain projects before.
Thank you.
Of course.
There's a man who's in the last session who's has set up a database called my.communitypower.network.
Peter.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's, so he's loading that with all the communities and all the different projects they're doing.
Yes.
All right. Sorry.
I'm also happy to just click the button for you, Dan.
Maybe we'll just go with that. Thank you. And you can read my email there? Okay.
There you go.
All right, good afternoon. Thanks so much for the opportunity to present. Wonderful to see so many representatives of local energy committees. I served on the Nashville one. My name is Dan Weeks, Vice President, Revision Energy. Live in Nashua, grew up in New Hampshire in the Monadnock area. Great to see some good Monadnock representation. And in my role, I'm honored to lead our team developing commercial projects for the public sector, towns, cities, nonprofits, schools, and then also the private nonprofit and for-profit sector. And for just a little bit of background on Revision, I'm proud to be one of our 300 co-owners. My colleague Jude Nuru, our Director of Community Solar Initiatives, is another one. I like to say I own a solar company with 300 of my good friends, including more than half of our co-owners are on the trade side, so electricians, male and female both. We're proud to have some awesome women electricians and want to recruit a lot more. So you can see a bunch of them here. But in addition to installing systems, we do the development, design, engineering, legal and finance, including when we work with towns and cities, usually bringing in third-party financing partners, as I'll talk a little bit about. We've been at this since 2003, over 10,000 installed systems, and very proud to be, as I said, employee-owned. Our mission, I don't need to dwell on this, I think we all share this here, but I do like to just point out it's important for me as a dad of 3 young kids that it's not just about climate fundamentalism, as urgent as that is. It's also about creating the kind of society we want to live in and I want my kids to inherit, where social justice is a distinct part of our mission as a company. We can move right along. We've gotten some nice honors over the years. I do just like to pause. Even earlier today, someone was saying she's talking to their select board, and one of these older gentlemen is an engineer, and he says, I know solar doesn't work up here because it's too northerly. Yes, the sun may be 93 million miles away. It takes a few minutes for that sunlight to reach planet Earth. But in terms of abundance, and I'll show you our latitude to make the local geographic point, but This is a remarkable image to me. We get enough sunlight in 1 hour hitting planet Earth to power human needs for an entire year. We'll never need to tap all that, but we only need to tap a tiny fraction to provide potentially all, or at least most of the power that we need to enjoy the quality of life we do. But moving right along, in terms of the availability of this resource here in New England, state of Maine there in the bottom right. Interestingly, New Hampshire, a little bit stronger insulation even than that, just a little bit further south. We're comparable to Houston, Texas, where the high temperatures reduce the efficiency of solar inverters doing that DC-AC conversion. So you can do just fine powering, and I'm sure a lot of folks here know that from experience, solar on your roofs like I have. And finally, the cost. The reason we're having a lot of conversations with towns, and I hope to provide some practical information about how towns are doing this today, has a lot to do with the fact that as solar become a commodity manufactured at scale, the cost has come way, way down. So a couple of recent changes in terms of kind of setting the scene when we talk, and while I'm focused on solar, Revision is an energy transition company, and we get to work with municipalities on EV charging as well. We do a lot of battery systems, mostly still at residential scale in New Hampshire because the regulatory systems aren't in place to be able to really deliver the grid services and get paid for them like you can increasingly in Mass and New York and other California certainly. So I'll focus mostly on solar, but happy to touch on some of the others. Many of you are aware, after many years of effort, we did pass a raise of the net metering cap in HB 315, which also dealt with community power. I did underline a key line here, and it pains me so much to have a lot of conversations since the bill was finally signed a few weeks ago, where because it was very narrowly tailored, a city or town has to use all of the power generated if they want to exceed 1 megawatt. And 1 megawatt, roughly 5 acres of land, if you're talking solar, will produce as much as 1.8 million kilowatt hours of total electricity per year. That is more than about 90 to 95% of towns actually use. So while technically the law now says you can fill those large landfills with solar up to 5 megawatts or use that hydro facility, you can only do so if the projects are sited within town bounds and if all of the energy produced is used within the town. So it's frankly very frustrating. A very minor gain. It'll help a couple larger communities and counties install some larger systems. Maybe it'll show our policymakers that the sky doesn't fall when you build 5 megawatts of solar like all our neighbors have done for years. And we can then take the next step, but that is something we have to be aware of.
What if one of the off-takers could be a part of a school district, multi-town school district?
So yes, I'm speaking mostly about towns, but absolutely, regional school districts are another opportunity. I went to Conval High School, 9 towns. They're made up that district. If an array is sited within any one of the 9 towns, it can serve load across all 9 because of the type of jurisdiction, if it's serving school district load. We think we can then actually aggregate town and school load if it's sited within the town in which it is serving load. So there are a couple of creative solutions. Counties are a good option because dozens of towns make up each one of our 10 counties and can therefore be sited anywhere within the county. So there's a couple ways to expand that from maybe a dozen cities, we've got 13 cities in New Hampshire and a few large towns, to a couple dozen more if we consider regional school districts. The key thing to do is to gather that load data, the electricity consumption data, and figure out, are you in the millions of kilowatt hours when you add all those schools together? Typical elementary school is in the 150 to 300,000 kilowatt hours. It's going to take a lot of those. Whereas a big high school, we did Dover High School, they're 3 million kilowatt hours. So a wide range. Start with the high schools, see if the load adds up into the millions of kilowatt hours, then you would be a candidate for a larger solar farm. And I'll come back to some of these themes. Sorry, I'm trying to throw a lot out and then hopefully we can get into more questions. So exciting but limited in terms of the net metering cap raise. ARPA, almost all New Hampshire towns and cities and counties did apply for the ARPA funds. Over 100 million distributed across the state. For towns, the cities are funded separately, but for towns, that's equivalent to about $105 per capita. So a town with 5,000 people has about $500,000 out of ARPA to do all sorts of potential things with, and the US Treasury has ruled that solar is an acceptable type of project. Like I said, most towns applied before the August deadline to say they want to spend the funds. They were not required at that time to say how they will spend the funds. So many are now going through a process with the select boards of determining how to put that money to use. School districts have a separate pot of money, but that can also be used. We think it can be used directly for solar. There hasn't been an opinion or a test case yet formally. At a minimum, it can be used to prepare a facility for solar, do that new roof, which a lot of schools will need before they put a solar array on with a 40-year lifespan. So some good opportunities there, a lot of money distributed in the coming few years, needs to be spent by 2024. And then there's been some other good sessions on community power, municipal power aggregation. I won't get into that here unless you have questions, but a bit longer term, that's an opportunity for communities that are changing their default supplier to one of their choosing to actually include in that mix larger local hydro, solar, wind, what have you. While those are encouraging developments, I have to remind us we've got a long way to grow in New Hampshire, and the next slide puts it in even starker relief. So our goals are way behind New England, and no surprise in terms of percent of power from solar as of the last quarter, 0.93% of New Hampshire's power. Mass, as of the last quarter, is actually a little out of date. They're at 18.5%. Vermont's over 15%. Maine is rapidly gaining ground. They're at about 2% now. Will be at 10% in a couple more years because of policy change. So we are way behind, but cities and towns are leading the way. So wanted to talk about three kind of main, if you're on that energy committee, your town hasn't yet gone solar, or maybe has done some but wants to do more, how do you kind of conceptualize the challenge? Three main siting opportunities, and I'll talk about three main financing and funding approaches. On-site speaks for itself. You see one of our Nashua fire stations over there on the right. This is often the place to begin. You've got the town hall, the DPW building, the transfer station, the highway department. If you're a larger community and have a wastewater treatment plant with a little land, those are often the best centers because a lot of load right there. So look at those existing facilities, particularly rooftops, a lot less interconnection cost. You use the existing infrastructure, tie in behind the existing meter. By using the power behind the meter, you're offsetting full retail price electricity instead of having to sell to the grid through net metering and taking a haircut. So always start with on-site, and we or other solar companies can help you identify the locations. A lot of towns have capped landfills, often capped decades ago. Can't do anything with them really apart from this. The challenge here is it's more expensive to build. You can't penetrate that cap, so we have to use a ballasted racking system, add a good 20% to the cost to build initially, and generally there isn't load next to it, so you're going to be sending that power out to the grid and net metering it. Doesn't mean it's a no-go, but to be direct, generally it's going to be hard for small towns which don't have enough consumption to use that power. So we're envisioning a smaller number of larger cap landfill projects happen in the near term. And if we get a national clean energy standard and other policy changes, a lot more small town cap landfills. And then community solar farms, we use this sort of broadly to speak of the exciting developments happening in Maine that have already been happening for years in Mass and Vermont around multi-megawatt community solar farms. They can be on public or private land. Right now, obviously, to exceed a megawatt, the cap, you've got to have the load right there in town, unless it's a county or regional school district. But this will change. It's not a question of if, but when. And there's a good chance the current governor runs for another office. I think another governor of either party would support a cap raise. We've seen a lot of bipartisan support for an across-the-board raising of the cap. So by all means, identifying these sites, beginning to develop them. They do take years to actually turn on and commission is a smart thing to do. A couple pictures of the different examples. Hanover, for instance, has done great work. We can just breeze through these. You guys know what solar looks like. on the ground, larger. I just back one slide, I'd love to point out, we don't necessarily need to get into low, moderate income solar, but that there can be some exciting partnerships between towns and local, maybe it's the Public Housing Authority or private developers of affordable housing. This is at Mascoma Meadows, a rock up in Lebanon. And we can move on. So you can see what a landfill project looks like, not penetrating the cap, creating the additional ballast, some additional costs there, and then a larger solar farm, first one to be turned on in Maine. All right, 3 avenues for financing, and I'll breeze through this and then hopefully time for questions if you'd like. The challenges, I think you understand, probably most folks, if you've done solar yourself, you know there's a tax credit if you pay a federal income tax bill. If you're a town or city or nonprofit, and we've been privileged to do at this point about 208 projects for public sector or nonprofit tax exempt entities, you're out of luck because you can't directly access those tax incentives. The workaround I'll say in a moment, and then just a few other considerations on the kind of challenges side is without those incentives, you're looking at typically for a smaller municipal project, a good 15 years, maybe even a 20-year payback without any incentives to tap into. Will it pay for itself over the life of the project? It certainly will. 25-year warranties, 40-year commercial lifespan, but you've got to get the select board to wrap their head around a longer return on investment if you're going to look at direct ownership without ARPA funds or other public monies. But to the next slide, the workaround. So 3 broad approaches to financing for towns and cities. The most common by far is the PPA, Power Purchase Agreement. As the name suggests, you're not purchasing the array, the panels, racking, inverters, etc. You're purchasing the power, the kilowatt hours generated by the array, which are generally fed right to your facilities to offset existing load. As I'll say in a little more detail in a moment, we have local investor partners who have big tax bills. They've been successful in whatever they do, and they would rather redirect that money to, we think of them as local clean energy endowments for local schools, towns, nonprofits, to be able to indirectly access the incentives. So I can talk about that a little more. Land lease, we have plenty of towns saying, now we don't really have load, we don't want to think about a complex structure, we just want you to pay us something to put solar on our land, particularly if it's a landfill that you can't do anything else with. Great in theory, challenging still in New Hampshire because of the low net metering cap for most communities at a megawatt, because of the cost to interconnect. It's getting better, but we need to be upfront about the fact that it's got to be a really good site near to 3-phase power where you can interconnect without a lot of upgrade costs. We can talk a bit more about those requirements. So definitely good long-term potential, tougher on the short term. And then again, don't forget about the federal supports. A lot of towns haven't yet allocated that money to particular projects. And there will hopefully be more coming through a reconciliation package. Very briefly, the PPAs, because you aren't buying the system, you're buying the power from the system, there's no capital cost. That's financed by local impact investors. Revision did 70 of these on our own balance sheet to kind of prove the concept and try to jumpstart the market. We became an employee-owned company. We don't have the federal tax appetite, but we've been fortunate to have a bunch of investor partners who share our mission and live in these communities, provide the capital, and we're able to do the rest. I don't need to read everything on here, but at the end of the day, by going solar with a PPA, there's no capital cost, and provided there's a bit of scale, you can use the power on site, or you've got a very efficient off-site location that doesn't cost too much to build, you'll realize some immediate savings, and crucially, the potential for very substantial long-term savings. The investor partner has to own it for 5 years, otherwise they have to return the tax incentives. That would be an end run around the tax code. But after 5 years, they can sell it back to the host community. And by buying it at a discount, they're passing on most of those tax benefits, making a modest single-digit return on their investment. At that point, the town acquires it for a discount in year 6 or any year thereafter. It's up to you. There's no requirement to buy it. That's when it really becomes the energy endowment. And so for the next few decades, you own your power, and that's where we see savings into the 6 or even 7 figures. Yes, sir?
Are you currently accepting investors for the PPA program, and is there a minimum investment amount?
Thank you. We are always accepting investors. Without going too much into the weeds, we partner with investors on both the tax equity side, offsetting a tax bill, and on the debt side as lender investors, a traditional note. On the latter, that's something that anybody can participate in. We've been partnering with the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund for a while, and so they're taking investments to put that money toward these types of projects as low as $1,000. On the tax equity side, there is a lot of lawyer and accountant time involved, so we do have to look for larger investments. We can talk more after if you'd like. Thanks for asking. Again, I'll breeze through this now. I want to leave time for my final presenter colleague here, but can talk in more depth if it's useful about how the PPA is structured, and can certainly, Jude or I or other colleagues can come to your community and give a more in-depth presentation, but we can move right through. I alluded to the other, so some of our investor partners, especially the Community Loan Fund. And then on the land lease option, I mentioned some of the key criteria. At this point, on a good solar-friendly piece of land, we're seeing the market in New Hampshire can support maybe $1,000 to $2,000 an acre a year. So not a huge revenue stream, but typically there's no money coming in today from that landfill or other site. So there's some to be had today, and as New Hampshire regulations improve, that will become more beneficial, like we've seen in other states.
Excuse me, I'm trying to figure out what the details of, like, you have your investor, you have the developer, and then, for instance, the municipality leasing the land. How does that, like, so the developer sells the electricity on the grid, but I guess the municipality has to become an off-taker, but it's not a PPA,
So for most projects that have happened in New Hampshire, they've been on-site, rooftop or an adjacent field. They've directly fed the municipal facilities, which leaves the town as the interconnecting customer. So the town is selling any power it's not using to the utility, which is paying in the form of credits on the town's electric bill. So the arrangements, you have three key parties, plus Revision kind of bringing the pieces together and installing, or other companies to be sure. But they're interacting sort of bilaterally. The town and the PPA investor, the investor sells all the power produced, regardless of whether it's used on-site or sold back to the grid, it sells it to the town. The town then uses what it can and sells the balance to the grid. And to make sure that the numbers work, we do a careful analysis of your load based on the hourly output of the solar array in a typical meteorological year, and we can project how much of the power will be used on-site and how much will be sold, and factor in the different values of each, the value of behind the meter of that retail versus the net metering value, and come up with an accurate financial projection. For off-site projects, typically, if the town is just leasing land, the investor partner will be the interconnecting customer. They will sell the power to the grid. Typically, they'll partner with the town to assign its load as off-takers, or we can get third-party off-takers in the utility territory. It gets a little bit more into the weeds. A couple different pathways. But the question is, first of all, does your town have the locations on existing buildings or next to them? That's generally the best opportunity. If you're looking at something off-site, do you want a really simple lease arrangement? Not going to make a lot of money, but at least some in bringing more clean energy. Or do you want to be a user of that power, and then we can kind of design it around that. Sorry, a lot of different potential pathways to go down. And then finally, I mentioned already, a lot of funds available, hopefully more to come. What I'm most excited about in this potential reconciliation bill, I think we'll get some version of it, is a national clean energy standard, which would be some version of a feed-in tariff where essentially the value of clean electrons delivered to the grid will receive a premium, and that will thereby improve the cash flows across the board. So a project that was too small today now works. A project that was on a landfill and too expensive can now pencil. So look for more coming. We'll certainly be tracking it and letting folks know what we learned. And then the very final step is just, or slide here is, just the various typical steps in a process. You know, a town will want to think, do the decision makers in town, the select board, have an interest? Very often it begins with citizens like yourselves who are educating and educating and educating, and then finally the select board says, yes, we want to do something. Let's go out with an RFP or an RFQ. Clean Energy New Hampshire, as you've already seen, and the toolkit has great resources through LES. So finding a partner and then typically working with that partner to do the full assessment of your facilities, your loads, etc. And I don't need to kind of read everything here, but I think you get the idea. Typically it takes a good year or a few years from the time the town says we want to do something to actually doing it or seeing projects completed, which means even if the current climate in your town doesn't feel all too optimistic, well, beginning the process now and then being ready for when maybe there's opening of minds or policy changes or what have you is I think valuable. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you so much for your time.
Okay. So we're going to now take questions, and we can do a kind of, I guess, fishbowl type talk on clean energy in New Hampshire. If you have any burning questions you want to ask us, or just things that are a topic you'd like to discuss, we would like to take those, especially considering we just talked about this for about an hour. Is there anything you want to start with? Or we have some prepared questions as well.
Do you want to sit up?
Yeah, we can move some chairs up.
I've got a question for Dan around solar panel availability and any disruptions to the supply chain that you might anticipate, and could that impact the schedule of setting up your project?
It's been a wild year in the construction trades, as a lot of folks know. The short answer is they are still getting delivered. They've been a bit delayed. Most solar panels being installed around the world, including in the US, are manufactured in Asia. Ours, Singapore, Korea, some from Vietnam. So we have seen delays at port. We've made a point of not procuring from China, where there are some very legitimate concerns about the use of forced labor. And we appreciate that the Biden administration is cracking down on that. But that is having some ripple effects. So frankly, this year, for the first time in over a decade, we have seen the costs tick upward, where they had gone down steadily for over a decade. We hope that's temporary, but I can't guarantee that. We will see. One of our large suppliers is actually in the process of setting up a major U.S. manufacturing facility in Atlanta, or the Atlanta area, and we hope to see more of that, although probably not at a lower cost, but hopefully at least improved availability.
Very good, thank you.
That's just some feedback for clean energy managers. That's, as a energy committee, one thing that we always struggle with is finding grants and understanding them, and whenever I've called, I put links that take just too many hours to go through, and they're usually putting more. So if you were to put together on your website, you know, here it is, here's a link, here's who you contact, here's what it is, etc., it would be so valuable for us.
You know, we did that a couple of years ago, and it was so hard to keep up, which is the challenge. What we do at the moment, and maybe we just need to bring this back. There's the work group itself is an incredible resource. So Scott Mislansky, who we mentioned earlier, is someone I often send people to. I think what we need is that, I mean, in an ideal world, we would have that list. I think what we really need is more frequent opportunities to get people like you and Scott together with an actual human to do some tailored, okay, in your situation, go to these 3 places and start there.
Well, as an example, I called Scott, and
Right.
You know, he tells me all what they have, but that doesn't tell me what, you know, and also, of course, the state's reorganizing, and so they no answer for 2 months. I mean, so it's just incredibly valuable. I don't know if I'm the only energy
Well,
committee.
Melissa, how do you do it? Because this is your job, technically, in the North Country,
Yeah,
right?
so I work in Coos County, and I think I know what is available in my area, which is not unfortunately available in all parts of the state. But I guess I just have a list of what's available in my county. So I go like first to USDA, well, depending on the project, but first to your utility company. I will check in with Scott at CDFA to see what he has for energy audits or engineering studies or things like that. Also, it depends who you're working with, and then always checking in with USDA, always, like, no matter what region you're in, or what your project is, because I have found that USDA really wants to help, but they are not always the most accessible, so sometimes you have to go to them, so always reaching out to USDA. So I just have my list that you just check through.
I like that feedback though, and maybe one thing we could do is have like you put together, like, here's the list I go through for the North Country. Even just that would be more than what we have at the moment, I think.
I'll just add, don't be shy about pressing your vendors on what funding is available. It's certainly part of our job, and we have an incentive to help identify and secure those funds. We've completed countless REAP grants, USDA program for clients. We've been able to secure many dozen PUC rebates, which are still available, although the funding pool is a bit low. And same on the efficiency side. We consider that part of our job. I think other companies do as well.
Question for Dan. Does your company have any experience, or are you aware of any experiences with community solar arrays where individual homeowners can invest in a portion of that array and aggregate, say, 30 households that don't have the aperture for their own solar system but want to buy their solar power locally, and would that model allow them to take advantage of the tax advantages of that?
Thanks for bringing that up. Yes, we've done many of those in Maine. Again, for reasons of how net metering is structured in New Hampshire, which boil down to a much lower value of energy when it is exported to the grid, we haven't really seen that opportunity take off in New Hampshire. But you are absolutely right. There are people who call us every day who would love to put panels on their roof, but it's just too shaded, it's too old, it's not facing the right direction. So the model is tried and true. If there were individuals wanting to do that, particularly someone who might have the acre or so to host such a farm, we would gladly talk with you and try to bring groups of people together. And if you're willing to, accept a somewhat longer payback, maybe it's not the optimal 7-8 years for a residential rooftop, but 10 years or even 12, you can make the projects work. The biggest challenge, and wonderful to see my colleague Beth here as well. Some of you may know her from her years as a forester with Five Rivers Conservation Trust, and Beth is leading the charge on identifying land opportunities for larger solar farms, and those could be with community solar members who co-own and get the tax credits, or they could be serving municipalities like I've discussed, or even low, moderate income communities. So it'll come, not quite happening yet in New Hampshire.
Is there any kind of hybrid model that would allow, say, the town to take a chunk of that power and then have the remainder be owned by local people?
Not an impossibility, but challenging in terms of the ownership structure. What I could envision is that an investor or a group of investors owns the array, and through the group net metering process that is well established in New Hampshire, the off-takers don't need to be the owners. They could be a group of owners plus a town. So it'd be a little bit unconventional, but there's no reason it couldn't happen if we bring the players together.
So Dan, I have a question for you. When you work with these public sector partners, towns, nonprofits, what's the thing that's gonna trip up a project? I mean, because these are the volunteers who are trying to push it through. So what are the pitfalls?
Thank you so much, Sarah, and for all the work you're doing in the Upper Valley. Little side note, I'm very excited next week to be cutting the ribbon on Town of Hanover. Almost 2 megawatts. It's 2 side-by-side arrays, but to our knowledge, the largest municipal solar farm, and thanks to the great leadership happening in the Upper Valley with Vital Communities and others. The biggest pitfalls, oftentimes, so on the technical side or the siting side, you've got a lot of old roofs, naturally, and I've said a few times that on-site is generally the place to begin, but if those shingles are 20 years old, but the town expects to get another 10 years of life out of them, it's hard to justify replacing them now. You can put solar on a 20-year-old roof, but chances are you'll need to take the panels off and reinstall them sometime in the 40-year lifespan of the array. A fun fact, we do, of the 10,000 installed system, we do a handful a year where the homeowner is replacing their roof and looking at the side-by-side images of the shingles under the panels versus those on the periphery. The ones on the outside look 30 years old, the ones under look new because they're being protected from the UV rays, but still they're not gonna last forever, and you'll have to generally do the entire re-roofing. So roof conditions, same with rubber membranes, those are usually a 30-year lifespan, and generally you don't want it to be too close to 20, 25 years if you're putting solar on. Scale is a challenge. It is, I do have more difficult conversations than I'd like to have with small towns like Temple, where I grew up, and I've spent plenty of time walking through all our town buildings. What could we possibly do? When it's one or a handful of really small facilities, 10 kW, the size of a decent sized residential array, 15, 20 kilowatts, it is hard to make the PPA numbers work because there are fixed transaction costs. There are some lawyer and accountant services needed to make those projects, those deals happen. For those reasons, we do encourage towns with small facilities to not give up, but to look hard at particularly one of two things. Can you put some ARPA money to work? If it's a small 20 kW array, that's maybe $60,000. That's not cheap, but if the town has a few $100,000 in ARPA funds, maybe you can carve out a portion for that project. And unlike most other infrastructure projects, this will pay itself off over time. The other is to just convince the town to take the long-term view. Most towns, if they have money squirreled away, it's conservatively invested at 1, maybe 2% interest. Even on a 15-year payback, that translates to an IRR, a rate of return of better than 1%, 3, 4, maybe even 5%. So if you can do the education and not necessarily expect the zero cost option with the PPA, but get some buy-in for a modest expenditure, that can make virtually any site possible. And then certainly, a last note in terms of overcoming that with some scale, we've seen some great collaborations between towns and school districts. If you can get together and put together a portfolio, we recently did 7 projects in Lebanon. Some of them are very small, would not stand on their own as a PPA. But by putting them together, in Nashville we've done the city and the schools together, for instance, we can bring down the soft costs, the transaction costs, and make a lot more possible.
Thanks. And I'd actually, I see your question, but at some point I want you to speak a little bit because you're seeing a lot of pitfalls and successes in the North Country. But question first.
Yeah, so my question was going to go to Melissa.
Oh, perfect.
And to just build on what my colleague Dan said, the challenge we've been having is working with small-sized municipal towns. And I was just going to ask her, hearing about the fact that she works with these smaller towns, what has been your assessment of their interest level, and if, just to tie in what you are about to ask her, if there's that interest among some of these smaller towns, and are there some that you already identify, and how do we make that identify potential towns?
I mean, I can't generalize. It's so specific to the town and the residents, but I work with some micro towns in Coas County that are so gung-ho. I work with the town of Stratford that they have done energy audits of every single building. They've upgraded the insulation in every single municipal building. They've done 20. They're a very small town, so it's about they use about 70 kilowatts of electricity for all of their municipal buildings. They've installed 20 kilowatts currently, and they're working on another 50. So, you know, that's a tiny town that they literally said to me, we want to do everything, put everything on the table, and we want to do it. Shelburne is another tiny town. You know, definitely there is interest in tiny towns and small towns in the North Country, which that's where I have the most experience. But there are some towns that I have gotten in touch with who are like, no, we're good. Like, you know, we've got an oil boiler, but we're good. And they, you know, it's not where I can direct my energy most usefully. My energy is best spent with those towns that want to do everything. So, and I think it just depends on who you're working with. I think in those towns, there are people who just like will not take no from their select board. They will look at it any number of different ways until they can figure out how to get it done. And you know, that's how they're successful.
So talk a little more now that it's been prompted, and then we'll do another question about the kinds of things that you feel like build success, build the kind of environment where you do see projects getting it done.
Yeah. So just to set the stage a little bit, Coas County, when I started, didn't have any energy committees, not a single one. And we have 2.5. So, you know, we're slowly getting there. But it was just, so my role in starting this position was just identifying the folks in town who had the enthusiasm to do energy projects. And, you know, ideally there are multiple folks who want to do energy projects, and chances are they know each other, and so they can come together and do these projects. And I think what I have seen be most successful in these towns that are literally starting at nearly zero is start small. Like, don't start wanting to build you know, a big project, like maybe a big solar project. Like, we had those conversations in Shelburne, doing maybe like a land lease where some of the power went to the municipal buildings and some of the power went to all of the residents in Shelburne, and honestly spent a lot of time going down that road, and it wasn't a productive. We learned a lot, I guess, but we didn't end up going that route. They did go with, you know, a solar array on their town hall that offsets all of the usage of their town hall. But backing up a little bit, they started even smaller than that. They went to their select board and they said, can we just do sort of like get a baseline of all the energy use of the municipal buildings in town? Like, can we just educate ourselves and then come back to you with that information? And so they took that step, and they came back to the select board and they said, you know, there's a big opportunity here. The town hall is using a lot more energy than it needs to because you haven't upgraded your lighting. And by the way, you have this crazy demand charge that we'd like to investigate where that's coming from. So, you know, little by little, they gained trust and legitimacy with the select board, and took these sort of smaller and small steps towards doing the lighting projects, doing some energy audits, and then doing the solar array. So I think that starting small is a really good strategy in a town if you're just starting out.
Yeah, I guess I would kind of want to just open a similar question up to all of you. In, you know, perhaps a lot of municipalities in New Hampshire, this concept of spending money on clean energy and investing in it can be a little polarizing, and there are definitely some very loud people against it. I see Dan is like really a little polarizing. So I'm just kind of curious as to what your strategies are for building that community investment into this, and really making it something that goes from an idea to, you know, a reality.
Do you want to speak to this? I know Dan has thoughts too.
Sure. One of the coolest things that I started to learn and realize when I started to get into this space was how many co-benefits clean energy projects usually have and renewable energy projects usually have, and this is something Dan's work and presentation highlights, is that it can have many positive impacts, and although there's people like me who loves clean energy for the fact of the climate action, there's different benefits, whether that's financially, whether that's supporting more local control or low to moderate income assistance that can get everyone on the same playing field, on the same page, and say we all have similar goals that can be met with this one thing. So whether that's a solar project or something as simple as a LED light change. And I'd say to that, kind of getting everyone sitting at the same table and talking about your priorities first, and realizing that things can come of that don't even need to get in that more political, polarizing space, and that's especially true for some really small towns in New Hampshire, I'd say, from what I've seen.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I sighed because maybe some battle scars, and yet the polling is actually, to me, very hopeful. Vast majority of Americans, both parties, want more clean energy, and they get that solar's not just a fad. It's no longer just for rich people and tree huggers. It's real. I mean, it's delivering most of the growth of new energy capacity installed in the U.S. last year. Over 80% was clean solar. This is really coming of age. So for, I think maybe not assuming defeat going in,
Sure.
and speaking, speaking to the crowd. Crane Day is in a week at Conval High School, where I went. That was only a 3.5-year journey. And in that case, we spoke to a bunch of school board members who didn't want to hear a thing about the environmental benefits. They just wanted to know, will it save the district money or not? And happily, with a bit of scale, it absolutely will. And over the long term, it will save a lot of money. LEDs, I'm so glad you brought them up. We don't install them, but we cheer them on every day. That usually has a 3-year payback, sometimes even better, definitely not more than 5. That will absolutely save money, and you won't need to be replacing them every few years. They'll last for 20 plus years. I mean, a no-brainer, benefiting everybody, especially taxpayers. And then I mentioned Conval because what was key there was young people in the community. I love getting to work with students. Any chance I get to present, whether or not we'll ever build something, or maybe we did already, but any chance to go into schools, we can recruit and hire future electricians, train them up through our apprenticeship program. But we've seen great examples where young people have gone up before school board or select board and made the case, and it's hard to argue with the future about it.
And I think just going off that, just identifying your champions, whoever they are. In Shelburne, it was the folks who were willing to sit at the transfer station on Saturdays during the winter and answer questions, because every single resident went through the transfer station, so they reached everybody. So it can look a lot of different ways. In Bethlehem, during COVID, we made a video ahead of the town meeting vote that was circulated through a whole bunch of different networks because they had a really big vote. And they chose to be their Hollywood star in their video, a very well-known teacher from the local school. So he was somebody that people know and people trust, and so I just, identifying the folks who are going to be really influential within the community to advocate for the project.
So we are at time, but one more question in the back.
Just to reinforce what Dan said, I work with a school where the student body basically convinced the school to adopt a carbon neutral policy, and the board of trustees really took notice when the students came to them and said, this school needs to set serious goals for carbon neutrality. And adults sit up, pay attention, when it's not the parents hurrying the school board, but the students presenting well-reasoned, thoughtful, passionate arguments.
Here, here. And she's not in the room right now, but I spoke with Aubrey Nelson from the New Hampshire Energy Education Program earlier, and she left this. If any of you are curious to look, please do and jot down her information. We are lucky to have this program in New Hampshire. It's supported by NH Saves to help connect students with energy education and with their communities. They've put out this wonderful mailer that I have up in my office with these really great graphics about energy use in New Hampshire. And so as an energy committee, if you're trying to figure out how to get in touch with schools, connecting with Aubrey is a good place to start. So.
And we
yes.
want to drive our tiny house education center around to schools.
Yeah.
So please talk with us. We're going to be hitting the road.
So I am told that the happy hour that is on your program is going to be down the hall. So please stick around and enjoy some refreshment and more networking. Otherwise, any other wrap-up thoughts?
That'll be it.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
Please
for
stick around if you have any questions.
Thanks for making sure this was good.